Welcome to this Great Loop lifestyle video about Georgetown, South Carolina. I'm Kim Russo from America's Great Loop Cruisers Association, and I have to tell you, I was blown away by Georgetown. I have lived about an hour from Georgetown for 25 years, have visited it multiple times, and never really got the opportunity to explore it the way I did while we were on the loop. Arriving in these kinds of towns by water is just a completely different experience than visiting by car. So many towns in the US like this were settled from the waterway outward, and Georgetown in particular is the third oldest city in South Carolina and was settled in 1729. So tons of history here. It was a major indigo producer under British influence before the Revolution and a major rice producer during the Civil War era. So lots of history here, and that is evident all through the town. We tied up at Harbor Walk Marina, which is right along Front Street on the Sandpit River and just kind of in the middle of the action. But there are two other marina choices in town. One is Georgetown Landing Marina, which you see in this video, a little bit further out of town, but still very walkable. Beautiful marshfront there. And the third is Hazard Marine, which is also in the thick of everything to do, but just a little bit smaller. Moving on to shopping, I usually like to highlight the closest grocery store, which in this case is a Piggly Wiggly. It is 1.1 miles from Harbor Walk Marina. I usually try to stay within a mile, but that was the best I could do on this one. And then Front Street, which is marked here all the way at the northwestern end, but they're actually, the whole area of Front Street is a beautiful shopping district. One thing to note is that most of the things to see and do in Georgetown are closed on Sundays. We actually arrived on a Saturday afternoon at about 4 p.m., and most of the shops were already starting to close. Many closed at 4 or 5 or 6 on Saturday and didn't reopen until Monday or Tuesday. So really tried not to get there when your only day to tour is a Sunday, because you really won't get to see everything that there is to see. But there are some shops open, and there are some restaurants open for Sunday brunch and a couple for dinner. So we'll touch on those a little bit as we go through. But very lovely shops on Front Street. And one that was open was the Indigo Mercantile. This is kind of like a small gourmet grocery. So lots of frozen meals you can take, but also enough ingredients to make a lovely meal on the boat if you so choose. And then a final shopping place to note is Independent Seafood. Independent Seafood is at the foot of Cannon Street, and as you walk down the street, you see that beautiful house that dates back to 1765. And then at the end of the street is the seafood company, and you can see the fishing boats right there. Also, across the street from that is a local artisans workshop. So that was closed, but something I'm sure would be lovely to visit. Next up, let's talk some restaurants. Buzz's Roost is where we had dinner Sunday evening with the crew of YOLO, and it's just a fun place. They have live music on an outdoor deck, just kind of typical bar food, but a great place to just enjoy the beautiful weather and some friends. Georgetown Creamery, I have to give a mention. If you've watched these videos, I have mentioned before that I'm on a quest to find the best ice cream on the Great Loop, and so far this may be it. They had some really interesting flavors. I had 2 scoops. One was Barking Pretzel, which is a brown sugar based ice cream with peanut butter, chocolatey pretzels, and pieces of salty pretzel bark. And then the other one was Rich and Famous, which was chunks of brownies and cookie dough with chocolate cookie revel in vanilla ice cream. I have to say the barking pretzel was my favorite of the 2. It was really, really good. So I will keep searching for that best ice cream, but so far this is definitely a contender. Next is the River Room. We did not eat there this time around, but we've been there before when visiting other loopers who were coming through Georgetown. They have a little something for everyone, and they do a lot of it with a southern flair. So highly recommended. We really enjoyed the River Room last time around. Rollin' Local we also did not visit. Again, it was a short visit and a lot was closed, but this was highly recommended by the Marina staff and is a local sushi restaurant. And then SoCal Grill was one of the few things open on Sunday. It was open for brunch and seemed really busy, and also came highly recommended by the Marina. And then finally on the restaurant front, shortly after we arrived in Georgetown, Coco from the motor vessel Pearl came and introduced herself and invited us to dinner with them and another couple from their dock. So we enjoyed the dinner, especially the company with Coco and Wally from Pearl. And the food was good. It was just pretty pricey, we felt like, for what the food was. So not sure it would be a high recommendation, but it was definitely an enjoyable evening. In addition to the shopping and restaurants in Georgetown, there is actually a lot of attractions to see. One is the Harbor Walk, which actually runs behind the buildings on Front Street, so between the Front Street buildings and the Marina. And one of the boats you just saw there at anchor was Calypso, and the crew of Calypso came in, dinghied into the marina, and chatted with us for a little while on Sunday, so we enjoyed meeting them. But the Harbor Walk is just a great place to walk around. Many of the restaurants do have a back deck that backs up to the Harbor Walk. So a unique feature of Georgetown in that you have the history combined with the new Harbor Walk that highlights all of the boat and the seamanship of the area. There are also 4 museums, and this is the Kaminsky House Museum. It is a house that dates back to 1769 and was built by a businessman who was known as the King of Georgetown. Its last owner was Mrs. Harold Kaminsky, and she donated it to the town to become a museum back in the 1970s. Another museum is the Gullah Museum. The Gullah culture exists in this part of South Carolina as well as in parts of Georgia, a little bit of North Carolina, and some of Florida. It is a culture that is based on the descendants of enslaved people and therefore has a lot of African influence. It also has its own language, and it's a sometimes called Sea Island Creole, but it relies on some African sentence structure and grammar and some African words and blends that with English. But in addition to the language, there is a really rich history and culture there in crafts such as the sweetgrass baskets you'll see around the Charleston and Georgetown area, and also its own cuisine. So they have a museum here in Georgetown that explores the history of that culture. There is also the South Carolina Maritime Museum, which as boaters is kind of a must stop for all of us. And then the one I hear the most about from other loopers is the Rice Museum. And Georgetown was actually, the port of Georgetown was the largest exporter of rice in the world leading up to the Civil War. So a very long and in-depth history of rice growing in this area. And there is a museum all about that. All of these museums were closed on Sunday as well. So I feel like we really missed out on a lot of these things, and I can't recommend any of them over another if you don't have time to do them all, but they're all highly reviewed, so do a little bit of research and pick the ones that you think you'd be most interested in. My absolute favorite thing to do on this trip to Georgetown was just to stroll around the historic district. And this historic district really kind of runs between Church Street and Front Street in that area there. And it is just this quintessential Southern town that is steeped in Southern charm. Beautiful homes dating from the 1700s and the 1800s. Every street is lined with live oaks, and the visitor center will give you a map that you can do a self-guided walking tour, and there are over 66 buildings and homes on this walking tour, and it gives a brief history of each of them. That was closed, but we were able to get a copy of that from a fellow looper. The crew of Calypso let us take a picture of theirs, which they had gotten the day before. So we were able to walk around and learn some of the history of these buildings. A lot of them have a little plaque by the front door that gives the date that it was built, so you can kind of get a good idea of the history here. I also kept hearing a rooster crowing, and I eventually found him in somebody's driveway, which is the first time I had seen a rooster since Key West, so that was kind of different. But several beautiful churches in this historic area as well, and this entire historic district is on the National Register of Historic Places. So definitely explore there. Really enjoyed just walking the streets. We also enjoyed in Georgetown that we had a lot of visits from other loopers. So in addition to those I've already mentioned, we saw the crew of Perfect Choice when they stopped in to fuel, and we got to visit with the crew of Neverland. They pulled in the night before we left. So it was really a fun visit at Georgetown, one of my favorite stops so far. Next up, gosh, we're not exactly sure where the next Looper Lifestyle video will come from. But there's definitely more to come, and you can check out our cruising info videos to find out where we're going next. Thanks for watching.